Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, but today I wanted to just do an update on tinyBuild. So we've had their half-year results, and we've also had a few releases since I last spoke about them. So I'll go through some of those and talk about some of the big releases that are coming up in the next few months. So on the 30th of September, which I think was, well, it's a bit over a week now, but yeah, a couple of weeks ago, tinyBuild released its half-year results for the 6 months ended 30th of June 2024. So I'm going to go through these, as I said, and have a look at some of the recent and upcoming releases. So yeah, this is just to highlight for anyone who doesn't know, this is one of my company update newsletters that goes out. So if you want to get these in your inbox, this one went out on the 7th of October. So we're just around about a week um, past when I actually sent this out. And I think that'll be about the same cadence when I do these videos. It'll probably be about a week or so after I do the update. So if you want to get the update and there's going to be a lot of numbers, so this is probably going to be good to read. Um, if you want to actually read through the update, then yeah, go over to firm returns, have a look at the company updates tab, and you've got the whole list there. Or and ideally, you sign up to the free newsletter as well, and you'll get these company updates in your inbox directly, so you don't even have to go and look them up. Right. Anyway, let's start having a look through the half year results. So total revenue fell 19.1% to 18,835,000 from 23,295,000 in the first half of 2023. This was primarily due to development services revenue, which saw a further drop to 1,408,000 from 5,224,000 in the first half of 2023, and it was 11,134,000 in the first half of 2022. So it really shows you how much of their revenue was coming from these development services back in sort of the peak revenue time of 2022. And obviously these deals kind of evaporated in 2023 and yeah, just down to a very low level now. But the good news is that game and merchandise royalties held up much better at 16,837,000, and this compares to 17,455,000 in 2023, and in 2022 it was 17,466,000. So it's come down a little bit, but it's nowhere near the 19.1% drop that you've seen overall, and even larger if you just look at development services in isolation. I mean, it's almost down 90% from 2022. And then you've got events revenue as well, which was 590,000, so much smaller, and that's pretty much it's just slightly down on the prior year, which was 616,000. So yeah, and that was also a big build up. I think it had been pretty much non-existent in 21 and 22, maybe around 100,000 or something, because obviously they couldn't do in-person events because of the pandemic. Um, but yeah, the events business being DevGam, and we'll mention that a little bit later when we start talking about non-controlling interests because of the way that ownership structure works. So we've had a look at the revenue. The cost of sales also decreased as you'd hope. It didn't quite decrease as much. It decreased by 15.5% to 11,692,000, down from 13,832,000. So this made the gross profit before impairment of development costs. So just taking the well, it's going to be the amortizations so it's still costs that occurred in an earlier period. It's not like the cash coming out at that time, but Yeah, it's effectively analogous to the cost that went into making the product. Um, yeah, the equivalent of your inventories, the cost of building, I don't know, a physical item or whatever, and then being taken away as you sell it. But yeah, this made the gross profit before impairment of development costs 7,143,000. So yeah, down from 9,463,000 in the first half of 2023. And the corresponding profit margin was 37.9%, down from 40.6%. We can further examine the cost of sales by excluding the development cost amortization charge. So this was 4,537,000, and the prior year it had been 4,996,000. So the amount of they've been well, the amount that the games they're releasing have cost is to make is has been fairly comparable across the last couple of years. It hasn't dropped too much, but the obviously as we'll get up as we've mentioned in past ones as we go on to it, quite a lot of the titles they've been releasing or the Versus Evil ones, things like that, have kind of flopped, and therefore the revenue has not really matched up to the um, development cost that was put in, or the amortization cadence that they're applying to it. Yeah, so we subtract these development costs, and then we get 7,155,000, and prior year 8,836,000. Um, so yeah, that's the subtracting that from the development from the cost of sales. So yeah, sorry, our new cost of sales are those two last figures I did, the 7 and 8.8 million. So we subtract this from the cost of this reduced cost of sales from the total revenue, and that gives us a profit figure of 11,680,000, and with the prior year being 14,459,000, and a profit margin of around about 62% in both years. So you can kind of see that this is kind of the profit share, or the revenue share that they're getting with the developers. So you've got the revenue that's coming in is the net revenue after Steam fees, tax, etc. on the sales. And then there's a split between them and the developers, if they're talking third party developers. So with own IP or first party titles, it could be as sort of high as 90% they get to keep and give about 10% to the developers. With second party, it might be something more like 70 or 80%. And then with third party, it might be more like 30 to 40% that they get to keep, and the rest, so the majority goes to the developers because they publishing it. And there's also the fact that with new releases, they will reclaim their expenses before there's any kind of revenue share. So, so let's say in the case of like Broken Roads, which we'll get onto in a bit, which is in the next section, in fact, which is where a lot of the impairment came from. They basically written off the remaining development costs they had sitting in their intangible assets section on the balance sheet. So they've effectively written that off, which then means that because I'm sure the contract will have been that they recoup those development costs before they start paying any kind of profit share with the Broken Roads development team. It probably means that there's not been any beyond the initial payments for the development that were made, which is mostly going to be to the developers, the development studios, for staff salaries, etc. beyond that, they're probably not going to get any money from the game because they don't think that it's actually going to generate enough to get over the initial investment that was made. Um, yeah, we'll get on to that in a second. But yeah, that 62% figure is implies that you know they've had a pretty good share of own IP and like I was saying, with new releases that have occurred will have been higher just because they have to recoup the development costs first. But the new releases have been a pretty small portion of the overall um, uh, revenue generation anyway, or the overall revenue. It's been mainly back catalog titles. I think about 90% this year, or in the first half, which means that 90% have been games that are released 12 months or ago or earlier. Right. So, um, yeah, a second. Yeah, so next we'll talk about those impairments, as I mentioned. So there were 3,028,000 dollars of huh, no, yeah, it wasn't just 3,000, unfortunately. It's a bit of a mistake there. Um oh no, that's correct, sorry. Yeah, 3,028,000 of development costs impaired during the period, uh, which is compares to 18,288,000 in the first half of 2023. So yeah, there was an absolutely massive impairment incurred the prior year as they basically just wrote off pretty much all of the versus evil games and then a load of other projects that were in development. They just basically scrapped, closed down the studios and so on, which just led to a massive impairment charge. But um, this the impairment this year resulted from a $2.9 million reappraisal of the value and use of Broken Roads following its poor reception on release. So yeah, it hasn't done well so far. Been a definite flop, and that has meant that I mean, 3 million is this just shows you. So in this case, this was a game that was didn't have an early access period or anything like that. Had a demo, not really much else in the way of playtests beyond that. Um, Went out and it was just version 1.0 ported across consoles at its initial release. So that meant that 3 million for the underlying game itself is if it was just going into early access would be quite high. Probably about half of that or at least half of that is going to be all the costs of porting it to Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, which all was all done prior to release. They were all released simultaneously. So yeah, it was a big investment in that title, really, the 3 million. The game itself was probably more of a million to 1.5 million or something, let's say, cost to develop. But it's also been developed in Australia as well, where probably the salaries and so on are higher than some other regions. So yeah, it's definitely going to it's the same as developing a game in the US or something. It's definitely going to have higher um, development costs as labor costs as a result. But yeah, there's a final note here that the remaining recoverable amount for the game is calculated to be $500,000 dollars. That's using a discount rate of 7%. That's all they expect to be able to actually get on a present value basis from the game, which is yeah, pretty sad. But so yeah, subtracting these impairments gives a gross profit of 4,115,000, and in first half of 2023, it was at a loss of 8,825,000. So that being because of the 18.288 million impairment that they had in the prior year. And from this, we can calculate the gross profit margin to be 21.8%. Again, if in an ideal world, if you didn't have the impairments, it would be around that 37.9%. And hopefully when things are running more smoothly, that the rate of impairments will certainly be lower. We ideally don't want any projects that don't at least recover their development costs. And obviously it's going to be variable as to how well certain titles do and so on, but you'd hope that they can at least recover their development costs, the investment that's made in them. So yeah, we then have a look at general administrative expenses, which came down 18.2% to 11,092,000, with the prior year being 13,561,000. And there were no further intangible asset impairments beyond the development costs I just mentioned that were shown above the gross profit line. Whereas in the first half of 2023, there was another 8.908 million of impairments recognized. This will be things like IP and the stuff to do with versus evil as well. I'm not sure what that would have been classified as. But yeah, a lot of intellectual property and so on, and other forms of intangible assets beyond just the software development, the capitalized software development expenses. So I've said as well that I'd expect the administrative expenses figure to fall further in the second half of the year when factoring in the severance payments that were probably made in the first half, being for the studios they closed in the first half of this year. And the staff reduction. They took the staff down by about a third from what I can see. I mean, that obviously includes the closure of Verse Evil and so on, which had originally around 50 people or something. So that accounts for a large part of that. But yeah, there's still obviously all the closure and so on, and it's a big drop in that. But offsetting this could be higher marketing costs, as they've got some really big titles that have been releasing in the second half of this year, that have had a fair amount of influence in marketing spend, which is probably one of the cheaper forms of marketing compared to getting big expensive trailers put into showcases in Gamescom and all these other sort of things. The influencer marketing is probably a cheaper alternative and quite effective from what we've seen so far. So there was also a gain of $773,000 on disposal of intangible assets recognized in relation to the sale of Totally Reliable Delivery Service and Surgeon Simulator for total cash consideration of $3 million, of which $2.6 million was received upfront, and the remaining $0.4 million will be received within 6 months of the closing date. So this is good to get an actual solid figure on this, because we were sort of wondering, we didn't know they'd been disclosed that these had been sold around the time of the full year results for the prior year. They'd mentioned in a trading update that these had been sold, but we weren't given an actual figure. And there was speculation of, was it just going to be, it's going to be less than $1 million or something, that they'd have been just given away. But it seems like this is a fairly reasonable amount that they've sold these for, and recognized a bit of a gain on the basis of their sort of carrying value of the intangible assets associated with them on the balance sheet. So So yeah, not a bad uh and I mean these are very much non-core IPs. These are not your Thousand Hour games or stuff like that. I don't think that fit into the or them and not really franchises. I think they wanted to uh invest in growing and so on. So yeah, it was a pretty good fit for ones that could be sold, and there's probably a few more like that in the portfolio that they could look to offload. I think both these were sold to Atari, who's now a very large investor in the well, shareholder in the company, participating in the capital raise as well. Um, yeah, but with these operating expenses exceeding the gross profit, the company incurred an operating loss of $6,169,000, and it was which is an improvement on the loss in the first half of 2023, which was 31,942,000. And then we have a net loss, after accounting for tax and so on, of 6,581,000 versus 25,523,000 in the prior year. So yeah, the the losses at least reducing, but yeah, still quite a lot of it is coming down to impairments and well, but yeah, around about half of that is still related to impairments. So you take that away, you're still getting closer. We're getting closer to a cash profit on the basis of if you include um expenditure on things that are capitalized, development costs and so on. But yeah, we'll get onto that, the cash flows in a minute. Um, so yeah, there was I mentioned there was another 95,000 which had to be subtracted for the profit attributable to non-controlling interests. So this is Lerica Malieva, I think is how you pronounce it, who's the founder and uh, manager of DevGam, and she owns I think 51%, or it might be 49% of yeah, I think no, it's possible. I think she owns 49%, but it's if it was ever sold, she would then own 51%. I think that's the kind of the arrangement they have. But yeah, she technically owns uh, a non-controlling interest in the company through that because she owns effectively half of DevGam, and so she's the profits from that. It kind of gives us a good idea of um the kind of profit margins that business is generating because we know that around about 50% of the profit being generated by that business goes to Lerica. So on that basis, you'd assume here that it's going to be around about $190,000 profit has been generated by DevGam out of which is yeah pretty good considering the revenue of 590,000. So yeah, pretty nice margins for the event business there. Um, so yeah, that's just a little insight we can garner to the events business, which we don't really get much of a breakdown otherwise. I mean, the profits were much higher in first half 23. I'm not sure how they're recognizing these. There must be some uh other factors going on here, like impairments and things, but um or depreciation of whatever. I'm not sure quite what assets they hold in that business, but anyway. Um, moving to the balance sheet, total non-current assets, principally comprising intangible assets, reduced by 4.1% to 50,758,000 from the year end of 2023, which would be 31st of December, I believe. 52,932,000. This was due to net additions failing to offset the amortization and impairment charges during the period. So notice I said net additions because obviously some they've sold around $3 million worth as well, or less than that when you talk about it, because obviously there was a profit there, so it's above their carrying value. So I don't know, 2.2 million or something they've sold. Total current assets increased by 18.6% to 19,180,000. This was up from 16,166,000 at the year end of 2023. And this is obviously because they did a big capital raise, which led to an inflow of cash. So cash went from 2.5 million at the end of the year last year to 9.202 million as of the 30th of June. So they still have been had to, spend cash, as we'll see later. But yeah, it should be noted here that receivables have gone down as well. So receivables have fallen from 13,666,000 at the year end down to 9,978,000. So that's weighing down the overall current assets increase. But anyway, yeah. And just a reminder that the capital raise brought in net proceeds of $11.4 million. So yeah, you can still see that more cash has been spent than generated in the first half. Beyond the capital raise. So on the liability side of the balance sheet, trade and other payables decreased 21.1% to 15,964,000, down from 20,227,000 at the year end. And total liabilities saw a corresponding 19.3% reduction to 16,933,000 from 20,993,000. So netting the two sides off, total equity saw a 10.2% increase to 53,005,000 from 48,105,000, of which 53,261,000 is attributable to owners of the parent company, and 256,000, or negative 256,000, to the non-controlling interests. So there's currently a negative value assigned to DevGam at the moment. Yeah, probably because of the impact of those 2 years or whatever, where they were unable to hold events and were still presumably incurring costs. So cash generated from operations before movements in working capital was 3,418,000, up from 2,114,000 in the first half of 2023. And after subtracting net working capital movements of negative 1,431,000, and in 2023 that they were positive 4,175,000. So working capital movements working against the company, or this figure in the first half of 24, but they're working for the company in the first half of 23. The figure for cash generated from operations comes to 1,987,000, compared to 6,289,000 in the first half of 2023. So adding interest received of 6,000 261,000 in the first half of 2023, brings the net cash generated from operations to 1,993,000. The prior year, 6,550,000. If we exclude the $2 million payment to Steve Escalante in February, that is recognized as a decrease in payables, the movement in net working capital would have been positive circa $600,000 and cash generated from operations circa $4 million. So that's probably a more accurate figure of what the actual business did cash flow wise, excluding that 2 million payment that was made to Steve Escalante in February as the second part of the settlement from December 2023. Software development investment fell by 48.3% to 8,748,000. The prior year being 16,925,000, reflecting the multiple studio closures and project terminations that have occurred. Subtracting the net proceeds from disposal of intangible assets amounting to 2,295,000, prior year 1,234,000, 1,234. And that was spent rather than this year. The net proceeds was effectively money gained from disposal of intangible assets, but in the prior year, money had actually been spent on 1,234,000 had been spent on intangible assets. And adding $11,000 or $287,000 in the prior year for purchases of property, plant, and equipment brings the net cash used in investing activities to 6,464,000 compared to 18,446,000. So yeah, I think looking at the software development costs, that's going to be your main figure because I don't think they're going to be doing much in the way of investing from that. So you can kind of clear out those two. Maybe they'll sell some other non-core IP, but maybe they won't, or don't necessarily want to rely on that because it's not something they can sustain for indefinitely. And of course, it does cut down your top line revenue as they do that. But yeah, if you we just look at the software development investment, the investment in software development they've made, which just effectively equates to the capitalized software development costs. Well, it's the software development costs they've been able to capitalize and record on the balance sheet and then amortize as an asset, intangible asset, so then gets amortized when the game's released. So if we take that, we can see that 48.3% drop, so almost 50% drop is encouraging because that really just shows you the efforts they've been making to really get that down to a much more sustainable level, given the level of revenue they're generating from the back catalog. Ideally, we want to get, and I mention this a bit later on, ideally we want to get to the point where the back catalogs, not even really relying on new releases, but the back catalog alone can kind of sustain and cover the software development expenses they're making, and then the sort of the upside from the releases they're making, they're producing in a year could then potentially could be used to build up a cash balance initially, and hopefully gives shareholders some. Well, I'm sure investment will be into certain things will be increased a little bit. Some of that will go into that, but it'd be good to maybe get some money returned to shareholders in the form of share buybacks and that help reduce some of the dilution that occurred. But yeah, we'll have to see. That's still a hypothetical at the moment because we haven't got to that inflection point in the cash flows. But and not only would it offset the dilution, but it would help to underpin and give the share price a bit of a boost from where it's languishing at the moment. And to be honest, given the current share price, it would be by far the best investment compared to anything else they could really invest in, project wise. But obviously, they need to have a sustainable business with a growing pipeline and so on of titles. But doing that in a way that it could be sustained by just the fairly dependable back catalog revenue is would be ideal. So what was it? Yeah, and then you've got net cash generated from financing activities, totaling just what's that? Sorry, just suppressing a sneezer. Net cash generated from financing activities totaled 11,173,000. And in the prior year, it'd been negative 262,000. I'm guessing that's the pay. I think that might have been a payment of a dividend to a non-controlling interest, so Lerica. But I could be wrong. And obviously these cash inflows this year have been principally from the net proceeds of the capital raise. Combining all the above yields a net increase in cash and cash equivalents of 6,702,000. And in the prior year, it was a decrease of 12,158,000. So yeah, much less, quite alarming, unsustainable rate. Obviously, this year it's still been probably, I mean, if you take away the cash raised from financing activities, which is obviously the inflow of the capital raise, the proceeds from the capital raise, it's still like a net decrease of 5 or so million. But yeah, that's obviously a big improvement from the 12 million someone in the prior year. And of course, you've got, if you take away the other 2 million related to the legal settlement, then yeah, it's starting to get closer to that break even. Maybe we're about 3 million away at the moment. And again, with the releases in the first half disappointing and largely being related to versus Evil, delayed titles from the prior year, and the second half being much more heavily weighted towards the tinyBuild's sort of larger core pipeline releases that we'll discuss shortly. It does mean that maybe on the year overall, on the full year, we'll hopefully be looking at breaking even, possibly even getting into positive territory. But yeah, so just a final couple of notes here before we move on to the discussion of games. So with increased spending around the release of several major titles in the second half of this year, management has cautiously said that the cash balance may fall between now and the year end. I would, however, expect the inflection point at which cash flows from operations exceed investment to occur no later than the first half of next year. Finally, we've got some stats for this first season of the Hello Neighbor animated series, known as the titles Welcome to Raven Books. It has accrued over 275 million minutes watched across YouTube and Amazon Prime Video. This puts it in the same league as some mainstream media shows and opens the door to a potential deal with a streaming platform, e.g. Amazon Prime, Max, Netflix, etc. So now let's discuss some of the recent releases. So first we've got Train Valley World. This game didn't attract a great deal of interest before launch, with a pretty low wishlist ranking of 873 and follower count of circa 2,000. The release saw a peak CCU of 285, and it has received a total of 158 reviews since the 9th of August, of which 70% are positive. In comparison to the prior game, Train Valley 2, released in 2019, it has a 91% positive review score. So not been the best of releases, but yeah, this is just a third-party title they obviously agreed to. I doubt there was much in the way of funding beyond a bit of marketing and distribution going on here. So can't imagine it was a particularly big investment. Yeah, it's not really too concerning. So the release of this game was always going to be pretty inconsequential. But I think it has been they've done a new update as well that actually reverses some of the issues that people had. I think one of them was that crashes didn't actually on the tracks, two trains colliding, whatever, had very little consequence. Whereas in the earlier games, it had been a really massive thing as it would be in real life. And so fans of the prior game had been complaining about that. So they've now added a mode that an alternative mode to the game that allows you to play it with the same consequences as they had in the earlier Train Valley games. So yeah, obviously that maybe helps the game pick up a bit in the future, but it's not really helped it. Its momentum was still sort of killed at launch because of it. There's some of these other issues. And next we've got Rawman Food Fighter Arena. This was released as an Epic Game Store exclusive on the 23rd of July with a free-to-play monetization model. It's hard to get many insights into how this game has performed, but it currently has 4.4 out of 5 stars, which is very solid. It's around about, it's getting close to a 90% on Steam or whatever, positive rating on Steam. If you look at it that way, I'm not quite sure how it translates a star rating versus a positive rating on Steam. But once the exclusivity period ends, they'll be able to decide whether they want to change the monetization model for the Steam and console launches. They've also apparently not fully utilized the marketing opportunities available through their relationship with Epic. So yeah, remains to be seen how this one does. Yeah, I think it's one that looks like it, if marketed correctly and stuff like that, could be one that does better on consoles than PC anyway. So yeah, we'll have to see how they go about. I mean, you kind of need, it seems to be with the free-to-play model, you kind of need a game to really blow up and have a massive player base for it to really be sustainable. So I wouldn't be surprised if they switch to an actual premium model where people have to pay for the initial make a purchase of the initial game when they move more broadly, or when they leave that exclusivity period on Epic Game Store and move to Steam and consoles. But we'll see. So then we've got Level Zero Extraction. So having been a standout title in the Steam Next Fest, this game had a lot of momentum leading to its 13th of August early access release. It launched with around 30,000 followers and a wishlist ranking of 59, putting it somewhere in the region of 500,000 wishlists. Unfortunately, it has since struggled, with player numbers dropping significantly from its peak of 2,601,000 to just 138 in the last 24 hours. You see this also in the reviews, which managed to briefly touch 70% positive, but have subsequently dropped to 63% overall and 50% for those posted in the last 30 days. So I've played the game for around 14 hours, spread over 3 weekends, which were, I think, the first 3 weekends after release. I can say that my experience follows a similar trajectory to the review score. It was initially challenging, but pretty good fun, as everyone was similarly equipped. Consequently, the combat between mercs was fairly evenly balanced. But by the second and third weeks, the hardcore players had progressed to, so these are the players that are playing it pretty much every day, um, and had probably up by that this point got to the probably past 100 hours or something of gameplay playtime. They'd progressed to a much higher tier weapons, while casual players like myself were still using entry-level guns. This resulted in some very unbalanced and frustrating combat that is evidently driving away new and casual players. So developers are working to fix this imbalance, possibly through some kind of matchmaking system where players with similar gear and experience are put together. But however they do it, it's likely going to require a full relaunch with associated marketing to get players back. Yeah, I mean the players have really dropped off a cliff on this one. There's a, I don't know how many copies were that have been sold, been refunded and that, but yeah, it's got a lot of wish lists, a lot of people following it. But yeah, you've got to now that that review score is quite low. It's going to be a really real struggle to convert those wish lists. Without you kind of need to bring new people in as well, get them in, get that review score going up, and then maybe those wish lists start to convert. But yeah, it's obviously becomes a big challenge when a game struggles a bit on launch. They also the asymmetric nature of the game makes it very challenging because you've they've kind of found that the um people either play mercs or they play which are the human uh characters in the game, or they play the aliens, and there's very little crossover. They kind of thought initially that maybe there would people would play as mercs and then they'd transfer across to spending a bit of time as aliens, so they could kind of it could be fairly balanced like that. But actually, and this, I mean, I'm fall into this category as well. I've only ever played as the mercs, as the human characters. Um, it currently is that you've got people who want to who are mercs and they say, oh, the aliens are overpowered or whatever kind of stuff, and you've got aliens who say, oh, the mercs are overpowered, and so you've got these two competing groups of players who have different wants, and it's very hard to get that balance in power of the two different types and please both groups is quite challenging, and that obviously leads to that's weighing on the review score as well. But I never really had too much trouble with the aliens. I always thought they were supposed to be really difficult, and they still were defeatable, and there were points where where it did feel like it got a bit easy to get rid of them. They increased the challenge again. Um, they increased the power of the aliens and made them harder to kill, and that's kind of I think how it's supposed to be. But the thing for me was as playing as a merc was just the balance. It was going into a map and having other merc, other human people playing humans that had way better guns than you, and then that's just and they just can just wipe you out, and they know where your spawn points are and stuff like that, so they could just come over and take you out before you even have a chance. So you're not just the aliens alone would be enough challenge. But now you're having to deal with you've just got no chance if you've got guys with automatic like assault rifles and things like that, and shotguns and flamethrowers and all sorts of stuff, and really overpowered melee weapons that yeah, you can't. And the thing is, as well, some of the entry level guns are just not powerful enough. Like you've got a, I think they've changed it now, so you've got a pistol as the starting weapon. But it was originally a nail gun, and I remember my friend and a guy coming at us with an axe, and he was about 10 meters away, and we were both firing nail guns at him, absolutely hammering him. We probably got something, we, but the actual you see, humans have got 100 health, and the nails are doing like 11 damage each. So we probably hit him with like it must have been close to like 8 nails or something by the time he actually crossed the distance and got us. But come on, in real life, you've been shot 8 times by a nail gun. Um, you're not going to be able to swing an axe and kill someone. But anyway, and then the axe was instant kill pretty much. If you hit someone on the head with an axe, it's instant kill, which is realistic. But yeah, the guns don't seem to have the early, certainly the weaker guns don't seem to have quite the stopping power they should. Feel like with a pistol, really, it should be a couple of shots to bring someone down. If they did that, if they had it like that, and so I think that would help to the imbalance because at least then if it takes 2 or 3 shots to take someone down with a pistol, um, and you're going against an assault rifle, you're not. It's still fairly balanced, even though they've got the better guns and all the rest of it. But if you've got a stage where the pistols are, you have to kind of empty the whole mag into someone uh, to bring them down, and then an assault rifle they can take you down in a couple of seconds. It's yeah, it's not bad. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, there's some balance issues there, and like I say, I don't mind the aliens being hard. That kind of feels like how it should be. That it should have that kind of the real challenge is you're in a game where you've been hunted by aliens and so on. That's the whole point is for that to be challenging. But then the other the interactions with other players. I mean, another way to do it would be to have ones where the human players can't kill each other. So you have like almost the aliens like PVE. So the aliens are almost seen as like the environment. You could even have it. I mean, I don't think it's necessary, but you could even have it so the aliens were AI or something as well. But and then you just got other human players. Or well, there's lots of different ways they can try and do it. But at the moment, it's a bit of an issue. And the matchmaking system that I mentioned would be effectively using because there's a kind of a leveling system in the game, trade a reputation and stuff where you unlock different things and so on. But if they use that to determine who you got paired up with, so you people that have got a higher reputation or level or whatever get paired up with people of a similar level, and then new players come in are only going to be paired up with new players. But obviously that becomes quite difficult when you've only got 100 or so players online at one time, because then most of them are going to be experienced ones, and the odd one that comes on that's new is then going to be just paired up with or put in a match with people who are way superior to them. But anyway, let's move on to some estimates for it. So currently, I'd estimate sales at somewhere between 50 to 100,000, with the price per copy ranging between $17.99 for the base game with a 10% launch discount to $35 for the Ultimate Edition, which includes extra downloadable content. A rough estimate for the net revenue after Steam fees, sales tax, etc., would be 660,000 to $1.32 million. And I've done this by taking around about an average price. So I think I said it would be more heavily. I think there was 3 different editions, and I think I just put weightings on each one as to what I think people would go for. And it came out at around about a $22 mark for what I think the average spend would have been, and then multiply that by 0.6, which kind of takes away the Steam fees and tax and so on, and then just multiplied that by the range, so 50 and 100,000 to give you that dollar range. But I'd be inclined to lean towards the lower end of this range, given the drop off we've seen, and that has 2 factors. I mean, the lower end of the range probably means that because they also, if you've played less than 2 hours of a game on Steam, you can refund it. So there's potentially quite a decent percentage of people that will, especially newer players that came on more recently, they're coming into matches where they're just getting wiped out immediately. There's a pretty good chance that, good percentage of them are the ones that are leaving the bad reviews. Certainly, like I say, it's only 50% positive now that they're just refunding the game pretty much. So you're not even getting much revenue from them, but the sales have also just dropped off a cliff. So almost all of the money generated will have been from that initial thing when there was launch discounts and so on. So yeah, I definitely lean more towards the lower end of the range. But anyway, we're on to something more positive. But still, even though I'm being a bit just before I move on to something more positive, about Level Zero is that even with what I've just sort of mentioned about it dropping off and stuff like that, you've still got the potential that maybe they've done close to 1 million in the first in their initial launch. Um, and yeah, obviously the review scores have dropped down and what have you. And there's going to be a lot of work to go into to get it to recover it. But that initial amount is probably gone a decent way to helping to recover some of the development costs, especially since they haven't been doing they have it hasn't been ported. It come out initially in early access, so you've just got those fees. I don't know whether they've been sort of doing the porting behind the scenes in as well, but at the moment, um, as far as we know, all the development is just all the cost has been just going into getting this initial early access release out. Um, so yeah, hopefully, I mean, it looks like it should. There's a pretty good chance it will at least get its development costs back. So it's not an unmitigated disaster. And like I say, there's still the actual underlying game is has a great concept to it. It just really needs to be tweaked and balanced. And I think there is the potential. I mean, obviously it was had a lot of interest from the playtests and demos and so on, and that helped to drive the wishlist count right up to 500,000 at launch. So there is still an audience for this game, and there is still a decent amount of potential. It just needs to be delicately realized. Um, but anyway, we'll have to see how they go with it. But even as it stands, it's not a massive disaster. Moving on to Drill Core, this game has been a much more solid release. So the pre-launch stats weren't anything special. It had a wishlist ranking of 250. So I reckon that translates to around about 100,000 wishlists. And it had about 7.3 thousand followers. But it flew out of the gates to hit a peak CCU of 2,549. So that's I should have mentioned earlier, probably that CCU is concurrent users, so the concurrent people playing the game. And I think it's around about I can't remember the multiple you apply to that to give you the actual daily players. I think it's something like five. So the number of people that were playing it and that's probably doesn't count at launch, but yeah, the number of people who play, I think it's about 5 to 10 or something times. So that's how many people were actually active in it in a given day. But it has a positive review score of 82%. From It was 584 reviews on the date that I wrote this, but that again was a couple of weeks ago. Well, not a couple of weeks, a week or so ago. But those 584 reviews were received since the 12th of September. And the CCU numbers have been holding up pretty well since then. I think for this one, it's the reviews are the CCUs are definitely exceeding what you would expect for given the review count. Then they're not, that ratio is not quite in balance, and this I think it's partly to do just because it is a game that has a really long it is one of those 1,000 hour games, and it's a really long playtime. People can sink a really good number of hours into it, which just keeps the CCU higher as a result. But yeah, and this is I think what they saw in the playtests, and they were saying even though this was the smaller of the three titles, they had demos in the Steam Next Fest. It had been running for longer, to be fair, but I think it was fairly evenly distributed. So this one still did about, even though it's like I say, much smaller in terms of wishes and stuff like that, still had about a third, represented a third of the overall um, hours played across all people and stuff like that in the Steam Next Fest, or just in the time that they had these demos and playtests available. Um, yeah, and the numbers are still holding up well, and I think as of the date I wrote this, it was still 628. It might have come down a little bit. I mean, it's kind of um there's still a lot in the game, and it has a really good loop that you can play for hours and hours and hours. But there's still only a fairly small. If you look at the pipeline of what is coming out, and you can see when you play the game that there's all these different modes and things like that that are going to be unlocked with the full release. It's probably only um, maybe 20% of the overall content that's going to be in the full game is there currently. So yeah, there's still uh, you'd expect as they add new content and stuff like that, the CC is going to jump back up again as people have more stuff to do. Because it's still far from complete. But yeah, still a really good 82% positive review score, which yeah, is a solid launch, and that gives it, I think, a very positive uh, rating on Steam, which is good. The only one higher than that is overwhelmingly positive, which I think you have to get 95% for. So yeah, still it's very good. But yeah, the game has been priced at $19.99 and received a 20% launch discount, taking it down to $15.99. While there weren't any higher tier editions, tinyBuild cleverly bundled it with Black Skylands, the prior game from Hungry Couch, the developer, which helped increase the revenue generated. I'd estimate sales at between 30 to 50,000, and yeah, I'd probably put it more towards the 50 end, making the net revenue somewhere in the range of 306,000 to 510,000, based on an estimated sort of average price of $17, multiplied by that 0.6 again, to get it down to your net revenue, and times that by the range of so the sales range of 30 to 50,000. To this, we can add an estimated 3 to 5,000 sales of Black Skylands at $5.99 a piece for an additional 10,782 to $17,970. So it's a nice little kicker at the end there, and you saw a really nice boost in the sales of Black Skylands. You see CCUs and so on jumping up, and then the sales, the rating in the top seller list jumped as well. So it did a nice little bit of business for that game as well. And overall, the kind of the world that all sits with them. But overall, it was a very strong early access launch. It's definitely felt like it punched above its weight, given its wishlist ranking at the time of launch. And I mean, the return on investment is going to be great, and it's probably already more than covered its development costs, given that it's a very small team. I think 4 people working on it. They've been working it for less than a year, and it's probably already generated 500,000, and has the potential to really just keep on growing from there. So yeah, I think we've already, even just in the first month now, I guess, because it released on the 12th. In the first month, I'm sure it's more than covered development costs, and yeah, we're still just in early access. And there will be plenty of opportunities for further monetization as it heads to version 1.0 and gets ported to consoles. I think this will be a very solid one for consoles as well, particularly something like the Switch. But again, it still probably does really well on that handheld format is going to be really good for it. But I think it'll also do well on the other consoles as well. But anyway, so then we move on to the most recent release, which is another decidedly solid one, and this is Duckside. So it was the 92nd most wishlisted game at launch. It got like quite a decent boost. I think they did another play test a week or two before launch, and there was quite a good amount of marketing around it, and it helped to just take it from, I think it was in 110, 120 in the wish list, and it just boosted it up into the top 100 quite nicely prior to launch. And this probably put it somewhere in the region of 300,000 wish lists Pretty much anything that gets into the top 100, it's got to be 300,000 or more now. That seems to be the threshold to get into the top 100 on Steam. And it had 17.6 thousand followers and a pretty healthy Discord community as well. Um, Discord server as well. So the peak CCU was I don't know whether we I think this still is the peak. I'm not sure it's been, but yeah, it's 3,513. So it actually had a higher peak than level 0 extraction at launch, and yet still this wish list probably just around 60% of what level 0 extraction had. So yeah, really quite uh great launch there. And it was still holding above 3,000 a week later. It seems to have so this type of game generally has a bit of what they call a wipe schedule, because the servers get populated with all people's bases and stuff like that that they're building, and they get a bit overcrowded. And if you didn't have wipes, you'd end up with just some people just absolutely dominating the server, and anybody coming in then would struggle to get a foothold because all the good spots are gone and all the rest of it on the map. So they kind of do wipes. I think they've got a wipe schedule, and this is also when they coincide the wipes with updates. So they'll add in new features and bug fixes and all that kind of stuff with it. Um, so they'll wipe everyone's progress in the server. But I think they're still keeping what they call blueprints, which means that you have to get these blueprints to be able to build certain things and craft certain things. And so if you've unlocked these, they persist, but you still have to go and build them all from scratch again. You get all the raw materials and stuff. But anyway, yeah, so they're doing a wipes. They've got two different server configurations. I think you've got weekly wipes and bi-weekly wipes. Um, and so around these, you get a bit of a boost in users. The users will drop off as you get towards the end of a wipe, because they then kind of like know their progress is kind of going to be, as the name suggests, wiped. And then they'll get ready to jump back on at the beginning of the wipe and try and get all the best spots on the map to put their base and all the rest of it, and gather their resources fast and everything. So it becomes like a feature of the game to have these periodic wipes. And it's very much the same. It's what, as the game has been described, Rust with ducks. It's how Rust works as well. You have these servers with varying length, wipe periods, and so on. But anyway, yeah, it had the peak CCU of 3,513, which is very good. And probably yeah, and it was holding above 3,000 a week later. I think it's dropped down a little bit since then, especially after the launch discount ended, but still holding pretty well. Um, it's still doing what it comfortably above 2,000 every day at the present. And yeah, and again, as they keep adding new features and stuff like that, it's in a pretty healthy place, and it's got a review score, a 78% positive review score from 829 reviews. It's now over 1,000. It's close to 1,100, I think. So yeah, it's holding in a nice place. It's been flirting with 80%, which would take it into the very positive category. Quite a few times I've seen it sort of get very close to that, but it's not quite crossed over to there yet. But anyway, it's hard for this kind of game because it is a more hardcore game, and I think there's still a few little things that need ironing out and stuff. But it gives it good prospects of getting into that very positive bracket as we progress towards version 1.0 and a solid launch. Still, I mean, I think at the time of writing this, it was 144 in the top selling list on Steam. And it's now around about 300, I think. So the sales are dropping off a little bit, and this is partly because the launch discount has gone, so now people are paying the full price. But we'll get onto that in a second. So yeah, they did for this one. So Offset, it's had, as we're saying, pretty strong launch. but they've chosen a lower base price of $14.99, with an additional Duck Ops edition priced at $19.99 that includes a supporter pack. Um, and it at the time I wrote this, it still carried a launch discount of 35%. So that was a really were wanting to make it lower that price point to just get the player numbers up. So that's partly what's contributed to the CCU numbers we were just talking about there. Um, so I mean, it was selling cheaper than Drill Core, for instance, and quite a bit cheaper than Level Zero Extraction when that launched. Which helps to maybe this decision is what helped them to get the player numbers up, especially given that the wish lists weren't quite as high as something like a Level Zero Extraction. Um, yeah, so that 35% launch discount on the base game and a 45% launch discount on the Duck Ops edition, taking the prices down to $9.74 and $10.99 respectively. So it's early days, but as I said, the game was still number 144 top selling game on Steam at the time I wrote this, just around a week ago, and it's now around about 300. And this 144 probably translated to around low to mid single digit thousands of copies sold each day. So, and it's probably still somewhere the 1 to 2,000 range, maybe now at its current level. And now the launch discount's gone, so that the prices they're being sold at will be higher. So at the time I wrote this, I'd estimated it to have sold at least 50,000 copies. It's probably, with given we're another week on and it's been selling a few thousand every day, yeah, we're probably looking heading towards the closer towards the 100,000 mark. It might do that within the first month or two. But yeah, just on the basis of 50,000, this would equate to net revenue of around 300,000. And this is an internal IP game, so 90% or whatever of that will be kept. Of that, well, and obviously, as we mentioned, with the development costs being reclaimed and so on. But yeah, 300,000. So it's probably made less than Drill Core did, just because of the fact that the prices is coming in cheaper. But hopefully, if they can keep the people's interest, it'll be one that sells well into the future. And maybe as we're getting closer to a version 1.0 for it, and stuff like that, and it exits the early access, maybe we'll see a bit more of a boost. CC, but anyway, it's had a good solid launch. It's got off to a good start, and yeah, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. But yeah, overall, definitely a positive one. So now we move on to some of the upcoming releases. So first up is Streets of Rogue 2, which is set to come out on the 22nd of October, which is just over a week away now, as of this recording, today being the 13th. And it's currently ranked, or at the time of writing this, it might have gone up a bit now. It's currently ranked the 62nd most listed game on Steam, which again equates to around about the 500,000 mark. So currently similar level to Level Zero Extraction when that launched. And it has just over 27,000 followers, in addition to the 95.7 thousand that follow the first game. So it's already, and then you've got the Discord server as well, and so on. There's already a really good following for this game, franchise, of the first game in particular, that can be targeted with the release of the second game. So with that in mind, and I mean, when we saw Punch Club 2 come out, which the first game was Punch Club, was nowhere near as big as Streets of Rogue, but that game still did a CCU. The sequel to that game did a peak CCU of over 5,000 on launch. So that was shows you the power of having a really a game sitting within a sequel to an initial game that was very successful. But yeah, very popular. So I mean, I on that basis, I would estimate this one to do somewhere between in a fairly average scenario. I would say somewhere between 5 and 10,000 CCU. I mean, it could do even more than that. That might be an underestimate. But yeah, that's a fairly conservative estimate. I would hope it would do at least between 5 and 10,000. And just remember as well that with that Punch Club 2 launch, they did that 5,000. Its wishlist ranking was like it was over 200. Um it was absolutely nowhere near um Streets of Rage 2 here. So could be looking at far larger, but far higher numbers. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. But being conservative, let's say 5 to 10,000, that would be what we want to see it shoot for. And that would probably translate to something like 100,000 copies in the first 7 days. So yeah, it would be probably the biggest launch by far so far. Oh, sorry, the biggest launch so far out of the pipeline of releases that we've had this year. Um, and I'd expect the pricing to be around the base price of the first game. Maybe they'll increase the price. I don't know. Maybe they will at version 1.0, but with early access, I would say it's a fair estimate to say that it will be probably priced the same as the first game at $19.99. And there might be some kind of launch discount. Maybe they just do a 10% discount or something on it. Um, and I expect they'll also do a similar thing to what they did with Drill Core, where they bundle it in with the first game to juice the revenue up a little bit. Not that the first game needs any help. I mean, it's already sells very nicely on its own. Um, but anyway, yeah, and that would just be a few quid probably for the first game, bundled in, maybe $3 or $4 something extra. But that just helps to juice things up a little bit. Um, and this, I think that they've been talking about doing a playtest for this before the early access launch, and last I heard that was still going ahead. And um, we do have starting tomorrow Steam Next Fest, the October Steam Next Fest, and that runs from the 14th to the 21st, which really does it seems no accident that the 22nd of October was chosen as the release date, 'cause that's literally one day after the end of the Steam Next Fest. So if they enter a demo into the Steam Next Fest for Streets of Rogue 2, and that runs and helps to drive up interest before its launch on the 22nd, I mean that could be that could really supercharge it. We could be, you could add another 100,000 wish lists or something before we get to that launch, and it potentially be one of the biggest demos in the Steam Next Fest in terms of the CCU numbers and so on it does. But it's just pretty much one guy developing it. So um and I think it's if they don't want to waste the time on doing a demo, if they think that that's going to detract from the launch of the 22nd, then and I think the plan is still to do it on the 22nd, but I it wouldn't be a surprise to me if it did get delayed, because I mean it's very important that this doesn't flop on release. This game needs to be pretty high standard, even though it's coming in early access. Still needs People are going to expect a pretty high standard for it, given the first game, and the scope of the game is so much bigger. So I think they should, even delaying it another, you know, month or so, or even to the beginning of next year, would be better than definitely getting it out on the 22nd, which, by the way, is still later than when they'd originally planned to get it out. They planned to get it, I think it was back in August or something. So they pushed it back already to give some extra time. But in an ideal world, they'd be able to get a demo out. They'd be able to enter a demo into the Steam Next Fest, and that would give it a really uh, solid launch, but and really supercharge the launch on on the 22nd, but obviously that is just dependent on the quality of the game being there. Let me just get this up. So yeah, it's it's a yeah, I'm just gonna get up some stats for another game here that's coming up. Yep. So that's Streets of Rogue 2, and then we've got should probably mention I might change the order a little bit here. So I'm going to talk about Sand next, because we've got some more up-to-date news to mention on this one. So Sand has been steadily gaining momentum over the last few months, and I mean, this Sand was still over was still outside the top 100 list. Just must have been like maybe just a month ago, and it's now accelerated up with some marketing and so on that's been done, new trailers and so on. It's taken it up to number 72 in the wishlist rankings, um, possibly even higher now. Let me just have a quick look. Number 68 now, actually. Yeah, so it's still climbing. And um, which probably equates to around 400,000 wish lists. So this is kind of where Streets of Rogue was sitting. Streets of Rogue 2 was sitting around the time Level Zero Extraction was launched. It was kind of the 70 mark. Um, and Streets of Rogue 2 is now accelerated a bit as we're getting towards launch with a bit of marketing and so on. And we've seen a very rapid, and we've not even to this point that it was at the set number 72, we've not even had any play tests or anything for Sand. So it already got to like a close to the place level zero extraction got to after all the play tests and so on that helped to drive it. So it's in a very strong position here. And it had at the time I wrote this was a week ago, 28,000 followers. It's now 29,723. So it's almost another 2,000 just gained in the last week followers. And that's obviously that equates to wish lists as well. Probably another 20, 30,000 wish lists. That's taken it up to number 68 in the wishlist rankings. So yeah, we've got no firm release date, but they'd begun accepting signups to a playtest, which was expected to take place in early Q4 this year. And on this basis, we might expect an early access release to occur in the first half of 2025. That would be my working assumption based on the time between the playtests and the early access launches of Level Zero Extraction and Level Zero Extraction, Drill Core, and Dockside. Pricing wise, we can perhaps expect something similar to Level Zero Extraction, so maybe around $20 for the base game and then some higher price tiers. It's also quite possible they'll have a look to do a playtest during the upcoming October Next Fest. And this strategy worked really well with Level Zero Extraction, Dockside, and Drill Core back in June. They were real standouts in that Next Fest. And it could help propel Sand to around the 500,000 wishes mark, or I would say probably quite likely above that if the playtest did as well as the playtest did for the other games. And yeah, so just to give you a bit of an update, so they had this playtest. The playtest actually began yesterday. Well, it's not a playtest; it's technically a demo that's being, but it's effectively the same thing. They create it as a demo, so then it can be entered into the Steam Next Fest, which requires games to be demos. So they've got this demo out and they're doing the standard strategy that they've done before of trying to do a couple of days before the next fest starts to get a bit of momentum that helps to accelerate awareness of the game and traction that gets picked up by Steam's algorithms when the demo then gets entered into the next fest. And currently, I mean, the 24-hour peak since it launched yesterday was 2,159 CCU. So yeah, really not bad at all for a demo on its first day, and we've not and that sets it up quite nicely to get to some do some pretty good numbers in the next fest. Maybe we could be looking at higher numbers than that still, but yeah, and we'll have to see. Let's just track that through the next fest to see how it does. But yeah, that they're following the same strategy with that, which should hopefully really set that up well. So yeah, we'll have to just see how that's received, how it's reviewed, how many people that attracts to the demo um, over the next couple of weeks through the next fest. So now we move on to the big daddy in the pipeline, which is Kingmakers. Currently, it's ranked number 23 in the Steam wishlist rankings, which equates to around 1 million wish lists. And it has over 51,000 followers. So the sky is really the limit with this game. If it becomes a breakout hit, we could be looking at millions of copies sold in the first year and ongoing sales of a similar magnitude thereafter. In the downside scenario of a flop, the current wishlist count means we'd still expect to see it sell a few 100,000 copies. Yeah, let's say even if it did 10 or 20% conversion of the wish list or whatever, that's still a few 100,000 copies, which is going to be with the price they'll be selling it for. It's going to be a decent chunk, but chances are looking pretty solid from what I've seen. Developers seem very competent. And they've had a decent amount of funding for it. I think there's a pretty good chance that it's going to deliver. Certainly the actual gameplay remains to be seen how they structure into a story and stuff like that, whether that's interesting and so on. The actual sort of campaign they've built it into, but certainly the gameplay is looking very solid and polished. So yeah, that's the core of it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, when this does release, it will it will come out in good shape. But with the potential for game sequels set in other locations in historic periods and the announcement of a live action movie project in the works, yeah, it was a bit of a shocking revelation. They've been already talking to some because of the reception the trailer received. It was like 18, 20 million or something like that views of the on Twitter or something like that of the trailer, and across on YouTube it was millions as well, and yeah, just across all platforms in total. I mean, it's got to be. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said it if it had over across all the trailers and stuff like that. It's been something like 40, 50 million views, but that's obviously caught the attention of some. Uh, well, I don't know. It's companies that are working in the movie industry. I don't think they're quite movie studios or production studios, but studios that would help with the writing and putting and getting the raising the funding and all the rest of it for such a project. They've already, as it sounds like, signed some kind of initial agreement. No idea what the terms of that are or anything, but presumably based on it wouldn't go ahead if the game wasn't a success. But on the assumption the game is a success, they've potentially got some multimedia, and this would be a live action one as well. So with actual actors and so on, lined up that could really help. Just take it to stratospheric locations. But anyway, and but then even just excluding that, you've then got the franchise as I've mentioned, I think before. You've got the franchise opportunity with other sequels and so on, which it's the idea being that it's a game you go back in time to a historic period and you bring in modern weapons and so on to there and trying to change the course of history. That could be replicated in so many historic periods, and so many different geographic locations. It's a bit you're becoming looking at like a total war type scenario there. The Total War games, I mean, where they've just done dozens of different ones now. Even in like they've even got ones in the Warhammer world and stuff like that now as well. So and they yeah, but Assassin's Creed, with all the different periods of history and so on, they have those set in. Um, same kind of potential there, for this to really become a multi-title franchise. But yeah, that all relies on the first game being successful. But that just gives you the potential upside you'd be looking at. And as so one of my friends said, this we might be calling tinyBuild Kingmaker Studios if it does really well. Um, yeah, I think that could be fairly accurate. But I still have high hopes for Streets of Rage 2 if that really does. I mean, that could be a knockout title as well. Um, that does sells millions of copies. So there's still a potential for several other titles and thing. And obviously with them we've still got future Her Neighbor games and so on, which still has a massive volume. But we'll get onto that in a bit. But yeah, just finally on Kingmakers, while we don't have a hard release date yet, it's currently planned for 2024, meaning we should expect an announcement shortly. And given the price of comparable early access titles, I'd expect it to sell for between $30 to $40. So yeah, it'll be higher than the other titles in the game because it is just a more premium sort of double triple A, well, the double A title. Um, and this is the kind of the price point for those kind of games in early access. Like Mountain Blade, Bannerlord is fairly comparable, or Manor Lords is another one that came out recently. These are all somewhere in this kind of range of $30 to $40. So yeah, that's what I would expect for this. So yeah, just quickly rattle through the other games coming out or in the pipeline. So we've got Ferocious. This has had a new trailer, I think, since I last spoke about it, showing loads of loads more gameplay. It's looking a lot closer, a lot more polished. It's got some new things in there, like they've got mechs and things like that. So you've got like you're in some big walking mech with machine guns and so that fighting against larger dinosaurs and so on. So that's a new element to the game that's hadn't been there before. So Ferocious is currently sitting at number 184. And the Steam wishlist rank which equates to somewhere between 200 to 250,000 wish lists. And it has over 19.6 thousand followers. So we don't have any release date yet, but they are accepting applications for a playtest. So this is another one that could be taking place in Q4 and possibly during the October Next Fest. Um, and yeah, a successful playtest will hopefully take it into the top 100 wishlist rankings before launch, like we've seen with Darkside. But it's quite a different game. It's a linear sort of story-driven game from what I've seen. I don't know whether there's any multiplayer element. Um, Fine, but so it is. I don't know whether it would fit into the 1,000 hour model per se with that one, but it's which is what they're generally targeting for all the new games they're signing on and stuff. But it's obviously still has a lot of potential. And I think the demo or the playtest would probably be like the first couple of levels in the overall in the campaign, the story of the game. So that's probably what we're looking at for that playtest. But yeah, if those first couple of levels are well received, we could be it could really raise the interest in this game. So next we've got a couple of titles bundled together. So a couple of smaller ones. So they've got The King is Watching and Voin. So these two games are likely to be significantly smaller than the aforementioned titles. They currently sit at number 736 and number 550 in the wishlist rankings, with around 2.3 thousand and 4.2 thousand followers respectively. Their combined wishlist count is likely to be less than 100,000. So we don't have any release dates for either game, but both have demos. And The King is Watching is slated for release during Q4 2024. I expect we'll probably just get like a surprise release date announcement at some point soon for Voin as well. Um, but yeah, they both these should be all right, but they're not going to be. Uh, should hopefully add if they do get solid launches, they should be nice little additions to the backlog and so on, but to the back catalog, but um, and hopefully cover their development costs. But yeah, because I think they're both solo developers or certainly small teams. I know Voin is a solo developer. Not sure about the Kings Watching. I think that might be a solo developer as well. So pretty small investment into both, and hopefully they'll generate a return on that basis. But overall, in the scale of the overall portfolio, it'll probably be fairly inconsequential, but still worth doing for the investment it requires. Um, so then it was just started now actually because just before I wrote this, but the premiere for season 2 of Welcome to Ravenbrooks, so the Hello Neighbor animated series, started on the 10th. I've watched the first couple of episodes, both good. And I think it's just on YouTube, I think at the moment. I'm not sure what's happening with the Prime Video that they had with the first season. Um, at the end they put later on. Maybe they'll be adding it there later or something. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see for that one. But yeah, they've got both have passed over 100,000 views now. Um, since their initial release on the 10th. Today being the 13th, so uh, I think they'd passed over 100,000 yesterday or something when I'd look. But they've also got the idea is I think they're going to be doing weekly episode releases after that, and it's all sort of this season has got a bit of a Halloween theme, so October's a natural month month for it. And that was just so for the 10th. So the first two episodes released on the 10th, and then there'll be an episode released on the 31st. So presumably there's going to be something really spooky or something happen on that week's episode. Maybe it'll be a finale or something. But they've also got the third season in production. And I'd expect its release to probably be timed with it'd be probably a similar time next year, but I'd expect its release to coincide with the next Hello Neighbor game because I've got one in the works, or at least one in the works. Um, Ravenbrooks Online, I think, is the working title for it. Um, so yeah, they'll be starting to move to their strategy of having uh, the games and multimedia games and series and so on, not just asynchronously reinforcing each other, but actually now starting to be released together to really sort of boost each other. So you could probably they'll be having the series will be an advert to the game. But they did say I think one of the questions one of the comments in the answers to them their questions in the earnings call was around about funding investment in these kind of things, and they basically said that they're going for they're going for a lower budget with these things, but they are very polished actually, and they've got a good. I think the studio that's doing the animated series is the one that behind Ben 10, which is quite a popular kids animated series on mainstream media channels and so on. Um, they're definitely good, high quality. But the reason they haven't gone for like a live action or something like that is because they want the investment in these things they want these series to pay for themselves on their own, without factoring in game sales that are kind of adjacent to them that have been triggered by them. So yeah, they've already effectively said that the first season and so on must have paid for itself from the ad revenues and whatever kind of stuff they're getting from YouTube from the millions of views they've had on there, and all the 275 minutes watched or whatever must have generated enough uh to cover the costs of it. And presumably it's going to be expecting the same with the next couple of seasons as well. But yeah, so that's kind of where the Hello Neighbor um, franchise is at. Got another title probably looking like next year, and that'll probably be time to the third season of the animated series probably coincided to release with it. So I finally wanted to mention there's a major update coming out for Deadside in the near future, and this is a Deadside is a game that's I think it came initial release maybe 2021, but they bought the game. It'd already been released. I think they bought the game in 2022, um, along with obviously the developers of it, the studio Bad Pixel, um, and they've since been developing it. And yeah, this is this is actually the so yeah, if you didn't already know, Duckside, the name being very similar, was actually built using the assets of Deadside, so repurposed. So effectively, the revenue they're generating from Duckside is all, which again, I should have mentioned that earlier, but um, Duckside was a very low. If you take away because they were able to repurpose the assets from Deadside, it was a very quick turnaround game, probably less than a year, um, to get to the early access launch. And so yeah, that's probably, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was less than 500 grand investment into making Duckside. Um, whereas if you'd gone from scratch, and that could have been a 3 to 5 year thing or something to get to the point uh where it is because of the engine they were using from Deadside underneath the underlying assets and so on. So this is just a great example of yeah, they reusing existing IP beyond just the intellectual property of the uh characters or world or whatever kind of stuff. We were actually looking at physical, like technological IP, and I think, I mean, it's if they actually own the IP for Kingmakers, which is a big if, um, if they actually own that, I mean, that's like an incredible technology to have in there. Technological asset to have in their stable and to be repurposed. But yeah, we haven't had any definite confirmation on that, so I don't want to say that they do. But anyway, yeah. So moving to Deadside. So Deadside um, has got a major update coming in the near future. We've seen quite a few videos actually showcasing it. There've been some closed play tests with certain people who've been sort of moderators for the game and content creators and stuff like that, being invited to come and do participate and have a look around and fully able to release all of their videos for it and stuff as well. Um, so yeah, we've been getting to see a lot of what's going on with it and and how get to really see all these new features already, uh, as they're just ironing out the kinks on them. But yeah, this new update is going to contain, amongst other things, an entirely reworked building system. So it looks like they kind of completely changed the building system with Duckside, made it much more uh cleaner and snappy and stuff like that, um and less constrained into how high you can build buildings and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to have they had like a whole scaffolding system. You had to have put in a frame first and then you put all the kind of stuff. Whereas in Deadside originally, but now they've got like very snappy. Just put the walls, just put some floors, put some walls into whatever, and then that's it done. You don't have to worry about structural integrity in terms of like supporting beams and all that kind of stuff. Um, so they've made it much more. They've effectively with what they did with Duckside, it sounds like they've brought that back in those innovations back to Deadside. So it was working on Duckside with a separate team. tinyBuild Rigger has helped to they've set up to bring some of those learnings back to Deadside and to the Bad Pixel team. And also with Duckside, obviously they added you're playing as a duck, you can fly. So they added the movement was made a lot of the issues with Deadside being that it was you're kind of restricted. They were struggling to add vehicles to the game, and they'd added boats, and that took a lot of work to get the boats in, and they were really struggling with land vehicles, like cars and motorcycles. And I think I would imagine that some of the things they worked out with Duckside with the flying mechanics and so on helped to um, break some of those barriers and some of the issues, overcome, solve some of the problems they've been having with the land vehicle and so on in Deadside, because this update is gonna have land vehicles. They're adding a Jeep and several different varieties of motorcycle. Um, and this, by the way, like I was saying, because the map has been getting bigger and bigger with Deadside, and it can take even just prior to this update, which contains I'll mention in a second, contains a map expansion as well. Even prior to this, they had, I think, to go from one edge of the map to the other probably takes you close to an hour to walk or to run it. Um, and so people what the most requested feature has been vehicles for people to be able to drive around the map and so on, and just and avoid that bit. I mean, I've played this game a lot. I personally quite happy with the walkings of that. I do get the boats and so on from time to time to speed up travel and things, but um, I'm actually quite a fan of the walking aspects to it as well. Going between, I think it becomes part of the game. And I often play with a friend and we're chatting and so on. So yeah, it's different. But yeah, maybe if you're playing solo, having a vehicle and so on would be nicer. But anyway, it's a lot of people think quite differently, and they've all been desperate, and a lot of the most requested features in reviews and comments on their feedback channels and Discord, so that has been basically where are the land vehicles and so on. So yeah, this has the potential to really uh bring this closer to people's expectations for this game and take it closer to that version 1.0 sort of finish point. They've also, I mean, with the another thing they've added, which is probably good that they've added the vehicles for this, because they've added an absolutely massive new military airfield to the edge of the map, and you could kind of see this on the map before, but they've now, but you could never go to it. They're now adding this in, um, which will be an absolutely massive new area, bigger than even the last area they added, which was a big city, Kamensk. Um, so yeah, this just absolutely dramatically expands uh, the map, and of course, with a big airfield, it would be quite having a car to get about is going to be pretty handy. So yeah, they've this is coming in with the update as well. So and there's loads of other things as well to do with new points of interest throughout the rest of the map. And it's going to be. It seems like they've shifted away from doing a sort of small updates fairly frequently, which is what they've been doing for most of the last year. Oh, yeah, most of this year, to shifting to a right, let's just bundle it all together into one big update so we don't get people every time we do an update going, where are the land vehicles? Where are the features we want? Oh, so they're going to just wait until they've got them all together and put them in this big update that's coming out. And yeah, it looks like we certainly would expect it by the end of the year, maybe in the next few weeks, maybe the next month. Um, but yeah, in terms of immediate sales, I'd expect this update, which will coincide with the release of a new paid DLC, to generate a significant spike, much like the addition of the city of Kamensk in the last major update. The game, this game is still one of the largest in the portfolio, with over 100,000 Steam followers and 30,000 reviews. I'd put total copies sold at greater than a million, and somewhere between 100,000 to 200,000 in the last 12 months. And remember, that's greater than a million just on Steam. So Streets of Rogue, the original Streets of Rogue, I could probably put that at around a million as well, or over a million on PC on Steam. But then you've also got all the console versions, and they probably have easily sold the same amount across things like Switch and stuff like that. And and various other consoles. So yeah, it could. There's the potential with this game would be one that would work quite well with Xbox and PlayStation. I think would be. I wouldn't probably be one for Switch, but well, I haven't said that. I mean, there's lots of other games. It's kind of designed to be one that can be played on a pretty much on a toaster. That's how I think they do use it, even describing it, being put in the description. It's supposed to be, even though it can look very beautiful and stuff like that, it can also be played on. I've seen videos, people on YouTube and stuff like that, that they're playing on obviously very underpowered um, computers, and it looks incredibly different, much rougher than mine, but it just shows that it's versatile the way they've built it, so you can play it on pretty much any device. So potentially, maybe it could even be one that ends up going onto less powerful devices, mobile and things, but like they have with Fortnite and some of the other uh Call of Duty Warzone and things like that they've managed to make work on portable devices. But anyway, that's still quite into the distant future, I think. But we could be getting closer to the version 1.0, and it's still probably selling 100 to 2,000 copies a year at the moment in the last 12 months, and I would expect it to get a expect to see a decent boost once we get the land vehicles. It with some good for a bit of marketing and stuff like that, um we could be looking at a fairly serious boost in the overall number of players of the game, just on an ongoing basis, and with some new sales on. Um, yeah, I'll just end with my thoughts here, which are on the whole positive. The company has very significantly reduced its cost base and looks to be approaching a level where it can be covered by the back catalog revenue alone. Uncertainty around the cash balance is keeping the share price subdued, but I feel we are very near the inflection point for both cash flows and investor sentiment. Obviously, riding on the success of some of the current titles, but I believe management when they say their current pipeline is the strongest in the company's history. And if they can successfully navigate through the coming 12 months, all the franchise potential envisioned around the time of the IPO could still be realized. It also seems that they have been suitably chastened by the events of the last couple of years, with a renewed focus on ensuring the success of each individual title and executives taking a much more active role in their development. So yeah, I mean, I have seen that firsthand, um, and you can see it if you've if you look at some of the uh, this Alex, the CEO's Twitter posts and things like that, and various other things. You can see he's been and his discussions in the earnings call and stuff like that. You can see he's really been very actively involved in the development of all these titles, these core titles that have been coming out. Duckside, Level Zero, Extraction, Drill Core, Deadside, and I'm sure Streets of Rogue 2 and so on as well, and Kingmakers. So yeah, they're really on the coal face, yeah, in the trenches, which is really what we want to see at this point to make sure these games come out um, as polished as possible. So key milestones to watch in the next couple of months will be the launch of Streets of Rogue 2, as I mentioned, and Kingmakers. If these do well, the next year will look a lot brighter than any of the analyst forecasts, and the current price will be a screaming bargain. If they don't, then we're back to bailing out the ship, and further cost reduction measures will be necessary to get things to a sustainable level where the cash flows generated, well, the cash flows that the amount of cash they're spending is covered by their revenue level. But yeah, there's still, even if they weren't a success, it's still not that the company still should survive if they take the right actions. But obviously, then it's the future doesn't look as bright. Still deserves to be trading significantly higher than it is now, if they as long as they get to a sustainable level, if they brought their cost base right down. Um, it still should trade significantly higher than it does. It's still doing, you know, even just with a investment to just cut down the investment to just a few titles a year, smaller, and just did small titles and did investment in the back catalog, taking early access titles to version 1.0, porting, so on, games, doing new DLCs. And if they just did that kind of investment, um, then it should this company should be able to generate uh maybe well, you're taking the cost of it's hard to give it exact figure off the top of my head, but you're talking revenue then should be somewhat be able to be sustained between the 30 to $40 million mark, and then let's say the 60% of that or something is the margin they're making, excluding the amortization and stuff like that. That's just the actual like cash they take in from that. So yeah, that's 20 to something million. Then let's say to put 10 million a year total spend, that should be 10 million then for what the actual company can generate in free cash flows or whatever. Um, and then yeah, what kind of a multiple? But if they're able to maintain that revenue level by, like I say, with that 10 million of investment each year, and maybe slowly grow it by over time as they do release new titles, then they still should probably be trading 4 or 5 times their current market cap. So yeah, it's still even in a that scenario would be even with a gloomy scenario if played out properly, if they didn't uh drive the company to go bust by not cutting their costs sufficiently and so on, we still would end up with a pretty good result, hopefully. Um, but then yeah, and in the upside scenario, which is obviously what they're shooting for, it could be many multiples of that if they deliver on it. But anyway, yeah, go check out firmreturns.com if you haven't already. Have a look at the newsletter. Well, have a look at all these. I mean, I've got research reports and Securitas Bank being the latest one. You can get for free. You can get a very good, decent chunk of it covering the retail segment, and I mean, it gives you the overall executive summary, basically investment pitch, history of the company, all the rest of it, company overview. Then you get some details into the oh, I'm basically showing you the full thing here because I realized that it's unlocked for me, of course. But yeah, you get up to the end of the retail segment. Where are we? So you basically get up to here. So you can see all of this. This is competitor analysis going on here, going through the different competitor set. You get a breakdown of this segment's performance. They're just a general overview of their offerings and so on, the product offerings. Yeah, they're different. And then if you're interested to read more, it's pretty reasonable cost to get it. I don't think I've charged £30 for a year for membership to unlock all these full research reports. So this will give you vehicle finance, the other segments of vehicle finance, as you see, real estate finance, segmental breakdowns for each one. Um, then yeah, commercial finance. So there's 4 segments to Securitas Bank. Savings, which is the other kind of segment to the business, obviously being a bank. And then just a real detailed breakdown of all the financials. And then, yeah, taking you through all this kind of stuff, management, ownership, investment outlook, etc. All the uh, all the stuff you expect. I think in total it's about 16,000 words. So it was by far my longest write-up. But yeah, this is actually Securitas Bank's actually my largest holding in my portfolio now. So yeah, I've made it big one. You get as well with if you do pay for the premium membership, you get to get all these in your inbox as well. Whenever I buy or sell shares in the company, you can see directly. But yeah, even with the free, you get all these company updates, which are probably the most frequent things I put out anyway. Um, so yeah, you can have a look back. I've done update on Securitas Bank, just like I've done with tinyBuild. Yeah, and all the different other holdings in my portfolio. Um, so yeah, go check out. Sign up for the sign up for a free account. And then go on these out. If you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel, give that a go as well. I'm probably going to. I might do a. Let me know if you're interested in getting a me going through. I mean, you'd effectively get to see. Well, anyway, if you're interested in me going through some the research report I did on Securitas Bank, which again is it's a very long one. I think that might have to be either it's going to be a 5 hour video or it's going to be a multi-part there's series of a few different videos. But yeah, let me know if you're interested in getting that. Otherwise, I'm probably going to stick to doing the kind of the company updates. So I'll probably do an update on the Secure Trust. I'll do the Secure Trust Bank update anyway. And then we'll yeah, we'll go from there. But anyway, yeah, like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff would be great. That'd be much appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one. Good to be back, I think.